さて、高野くんの研究を正式に引き継ぐことになったなら、みおちゃんにも話しておかなきゃならんことがある。
何でしょう、伺います。
The old man paused and pulled an expensive cigarette from the cigarette holder on the table. Takano lit it up for him. She didn't smoke herself, but knowing that the old man did, she kept a lighter in her pocket. The constant buildup of little gestures like that were how she gained the trust she held today. Takano-kun noticed the Hinamizawa syndrome in Manchuria, not Japan. Yes. According to my grandfather's journal, around 1940, he learned that many soldiers sent from Hinamizawa to the Kwantung Army expressed terminal symptoms, which led him to surmise that an unknown infectious parasite dwelled in Hinamizawa. Under the harsh conditions of war, people sometimes lost their mind. In those conditions, those who were sent to a far-off battlefield from Hinamizawa spent their days under duress, and occasionally they exhibited terminal symptoms, hallucinated, and caused twisted incidents. Yet all that occurred in the extensive chaos of the battlefield. Every incident was handled separately, and no one suspected there was an underlying cause.
当時高野くんは軍医少佐として海外に派兵されていて、現地の貿易研究所で各種伝染病の予防対策について研究していた。そんな中で偶然、いくつかの錯乱事件が全て同じ出身地の兵士によって起こされていることを知った。高野くんは南沢出身者に特有の症状ではないかと仮定し、個人的にこの研究を始めたのだ。そして南沢出身の兵士を研究所勤務にして集め、いろいろと調査した。そして南沢独特のお社様信仰の存在を知り、特異な性質を持つ未知の疾病の存在を確信したのだ。
Some may wonder how he could be so certain that these symptoms were caused by unusual parasites. At the beginning of the 20th century, German doctors proved that some unknown diseases were caused by bacteria and parasites. At the time, it wasn't too far of a jump to assume that unknown pathogens could be behind unknown diseases. For instance, in modern times, it's been revealed that beriberi is caused by vitamin B1 deficiency. But at the start of the 20th century, many loudly proclaimed that it was the work of an unidentified pathogen.
はい。祖父はその研究が軍にとって価値のあるものになるのではないかと予想し、予算を求めましたが、一生に付されたとか。
As a researcher, her grandfather was very talented and passionate, but when it came to gaining the aid of political powers, he simply struck out. Hinamizawa syndrome. No, the possible existence of a parasite that infected the human brain and controlled emotions. Even though he made the remarkable achievement of discovering a mystery no one had explained before him, he was unable to convince others of that achievement and spent his life alone, unable to garner support and unable to achieve proper recognition for his achievement. Independent research has its limit. Talented people, funding, and backup. A research project can be successful only if all of those things are present. Takano had noticed her grandfather's mistakes, and that was why she did everything she could to obtain all of that.
当時の上層部は即効性でしかも普遍性の高い治療薬を期待していた。高野くんの研究は非常に興味深いものではあっても、当時の軍には期待されなかったということだの。
ですが、先生は唯一祖父の研究に理解を示してくれたと聞いています。祖父は先生のことを無二の親友と記していました。
高野くんとは同郷だった。 同じ蕎麦屋を知る人間と遠方の戦地で会えるというのは奇跡的なことだったの。彼とは年は離れていたが、私たちは固い友情で結ばれていたのだ。だから高野君からはよく話をされたの。画期的な研究になるに違いない。本格的な研究のために予算をつけられるよう根回ししてほしいと何度も。
祖父の手記にも先生がいろいろと各方面に掛け合ってくださったことが記されています。結局祖父の研究が認められることはありませんでしたが、先生だけが理解者でいてくれたこと
だが結局は何の力にもなれんかった。だから高野君にしてやれなかった協力を美代ちゃんにするんだ。美代ちゃんに協力するのは高野君に対する私の罪滅ぼしでもある。
ありがとうございます。祖父は良い親友に恵まれたと思っています。軍上層部に先生のように理解を示してくれる方が少しでもいてくれたなら、祖父の人生はもっと違ったものになっていたかもしれないと思うと、とても悔しく思います。
The old man closed his eyes and paused for a moment. Shortly after that, he looked into the distance and spoke.
実はな、真実はそうではない。上層部は高野君の発見に少なからず関心を持っていたのだ。
それは初耳です。でもそれならなぜ祖父の研究を認めなかったのですか？
ある事情により高野君にひなみ沢症候群を研究させたくない都合ができたのだ。その理由は私と一部の高級将校しか知らん。私を除き全員が他界した今、高野
研究させたくない都合とは何ですか？
Takano had believed until this day that her grandfather's research was ridiculed by everyone, which was the reason why it had never gained any recognition. Her grandfather had asked the military for funding so we could uncover the secret of Hinamizawa syndrome during the war. But just like the old man had said earlier, the military wanted an instant-acting weapon. That was why they weren't interested in his research. That's what she had believed. But as it turned out, the military had actually shown an interest after all. Before I go on, I need to explain about the Kwantung Army in Manchuria at the time. While the Kwantung Army was stationed in Manchuria, opinions were divided on whether to advance our forces north or south. At the time, Japan had troops in Manchuria, but opinions were divided on advancing north to deter the Soviet Union, or advancing south to expand our territory and secure resources. With the Soviet Union and its predecessor Russia being a landlocked frozen nation, they had long yearned for an ice-free port that wouldn't freeze over in winter. They had made numerous attempts to expand their territory southward too. Those expansionist policies were said to be a cause of the Russo-Japanese War. In the history books, it said that Japan won the Russo-Japanese War, but it was actually a draw, ending in peace signed at the Treaty of Portsmouth. Both sides had simply set aside their spears after mutually exhausting their forces. It wasn't like Russia capitulated and offered a complete surrender. As a result, the perception of the Russian threat continued to smolder. Later, the Russian Empire was overthrown by a revolution, but Japan was unable to shake the threat that the new Soviet Union would advance south. According to the history books, Japan went south. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and abandoned the northern advance. As a result, when the Great Patriotic War began, the Soviet Union was able to respond to pressure on their German front by pouring in their eastern forces. Though the Germans had managed to lay siege to Moscow, the Soviets launched a massive counteroffensive that reversed the tides of war. Even with the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact, the Soviets couldn't tell if Japan would attack them at some point. Because of that threat, the Soviets had to leave some forces in the Far East, and they weren't able to devote enough troops to the German front. For starters, the Soviets had forged the Germany-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact-2. Yet Germany broke the treaty and attacked the Soviet Union. To make matters worse, Japan and Germany had forged a military alliance. With all those factors in play, the Soviets naturally couldn't trust Japan to uphold their neutrality pact. Ironically, the Soviet Union was the one who broke the pact, but I won't go into that now. Exactly. Hitler signed the Tripartite Pact? Partite Pact because he expected Japan to keep the Soviets' other front in check. But ultimately, Japan abandoned the North. With the superior German offensive, many supported the idea of waiting and watching it play out. They believed that even if we did advance north, it would be after Germany conquered Moscow. However, that plan was exposed to Sorge, and the Soviets transferred their heavy tanks from the Far East border to the German front. That secured Germany's defeat at Moscow, and the Germans began seeing a string of defeats, starting with the Battle of Kursk. It was a turning point in history, huh? During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was recognized as a global power, but at least in 1940, the Kwangtung Army didn't think it was a particular threat. Japan had earned a victory with the Russo-Japanese War, and they took the new Soviet Union government lightly, assuming it wouldn't be stable after overthrowing the Russian Empire. That underestimation was corrected after the Nomonhan incident in 1941. After several fierce short-term battles with the Soviet Union's advanced mechanized corps that led to great losses, the Kwangtung Army realized they shouldn't fight the Soviets, and that inclined Japan towards the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact. But at the very least, up until the Nomonhan incident, the Kwangtung Army was strongly conscious of the Soviets and divided on advancing north or south. Thanks to that, there were also voices advising caution, suggesting we avoid all-out war with China in order to shore up our forces against the Soviets. But the Sino-Japanese War broke out after the Marco Polo Bridge incident, right? Oh, we're getting taught today. I'm learning things. I'm also getting tired of talking. I'm gonna start paying attention. I wonder if the voices don't play when there's background music. I haven't really paid enough attention to know up until this point, but I bet I'll find out by the end of the episode. Or at least by the time I'm done editing, you know? July 1937. The Japanese and Chinese armies were staring at each other from across the Lugu Bridge in Beijing. It was the middle of the night on July 7th. The Chinese army fired on the Japanese army in training, and they engaged in combat. This triggered the long Sino-Japanese War. Yes, according to historical records, that incident triggered the Sino-Japanese War, but with opinions divided over advancing north or south, the army was equally divided over a full-scale confrontation with China. No, in fact, we even received orders from General Staff Headquarters to resolve the matter quietly before the incident grew much bigger. So those supporting the Northern Advance wanted to settle the Battle of Lugo Bridge quietly, insisting that conflict with China was pointless in the light of their anti-Soviet strategy. However, those on the mainland supporting the Southern Advance used this incident as cause to dispatch more troops to China. They enacted hard policies against China, and thus the Marco Polo Bridge incident became the trigger for Japan and China to enter all-out war. After that, in their bitter struggles in the Nomonhan incident, Japan greatly revised their Soviet strategy. They signed the Soviet-Japanese Neutrality Pact and secured the route for their southern advance. The Sino-Japanese War got worse and worse. if the Marco Polo bridge incident hadn't happened. It's possible that history would have gone very differently. Maybe we would have ended up in a war with them anyway. However, if the South faction didn't get that chance, the military authorities would have kept restraining the Soviet Union, and the Soviets would have had to divide their forces between East and West. And maybe Germany could have invaded Moscow. Then Japan could have gone to Siberia. The map could have been very different today. Germany wouldn't necessarily have won the war if it had succeeded in taking Moscow. England was keeping its strength on the other side of Dover Strait after all, and the United States was poised to enter the conflict. Besides, Napoleon once occupied Moscow. But in the end, he couldn't beat their winter and had to withdraw. It is one of those ifs, huh? The Axis might have won the war. Yes, it's possible that the gunshot from the Marco Polo bridge incident changed the tide of history. Both sides had different opinions of who fired the shot, right? According to the Japanese side, a Chinese soldier fired a shot at a Japanese soldier who got too close to the Chinese camp. However, the Chinese side claimed the shot was a conspiracy invented by the Japanese military. But the shot was fired. Even though nobody knew who actually pulled the trigger, it sparked the Sino-Japanese War. Yes, that's what the history books say. But, Koizumi-sensei, what does that have to do with my grandfather? In the Marco Polo bridge incident, the shot was fired at a unit that was training in the middle of the night. Everyone was summoned for a roll call. They were missing one soldier. The soldier came back later, and it was said that he was sent as a messenger and got too close to the Chinese camp. By the way, did you know that soldier was from Hinamizawa? Eh? Really? When Takano-kun was talking about Hinamizawa syndrome, he said that soldiers from Hinamizawa could suddenly fall into a deranged state. And we realized that soldier from the Marco Polo bridge incident was, in fact, from Hinamizawa. Then what about the first shot fired? I don't know the truth, but I think it's possible that a soldier within the terminal stage of Hinamizawa syndrome fired the shot. That soldier was killed in the incident. Since there was no record of it, nobody knows exactly how he died. The Japanese side claimed that the Chinese army had fired at them, and negotiated with that in mind. Just for a scant few days after the incident, Japan demanded an apology from the Chinese, and as a show of force dispatched 3 divisions of reinforcements. The Chinese side was, of course, opposed to that. The situation escalated at once. If research into Hinamizawa syndrome continued, the higher-ups thought it would negatively influence the Japanese army's claims. So in order to avoid the risk of traversing that political gray zone, they rejected Takano-kun's research.
そのため、この時代になってもなお、祖父の研究が顧みられることがなかったと。
そうだ。
The war is over now, but there are still some conflicts there regarding historical recognition.
高野君にその気はなくとも、
Yeah.
南沢症候群の研究が公になれば、社会的な影響が強すぎて、一般大衆に不要の混乱と疑念を与えることにもなりかねない。
The voices are working now that there's no music. It's like there's a sound effect playing, but there's no music. It's kind of interesting. I'll have to keep that in mind and see if that keeps happening.
そう危惧した重鎮たちが今日に至るまで高野君の研究を黙殺するよう根回しをしておったのは、今私も高野君に協力しないよう長く釘を刺されておった。
Takano tried to remain calm, but she couldn't stop herself from grimacing. She had just found out the real reason why her grandfather's research had been ignored. It was because of secret maneuvers by political masterminds. If those masterminds feared it so much, ironically, that meant that they acknowledged the importance of his research. Takano was saddened and frustrated to no end by her grandfather's lonely life.
だがそういう連中は高いし、もう当時を知る者は私しかおらん。もし今まだ高野君が生きていたなら、私はそれを誤って全面的な協力を申し出るつもりだった。だが彼はもういない。だから私は美代ちゃんに謝り、高野君にするはずだった協力を君にしようと思っているのだ。
よろしいのですか。私がひなみ沢症候群の研究をすることで蒸し返しになるということはありませんか。
もう当時とは時代が違う。それにひなみ沢症候群の研究には単なる風土病では済まされないものが潜んでおる。研究によっては医学の名前がつくあらゆる学会がひっくり返るような大発見になるかもしれん。
当時とはもう風向きが変わったということですわね。
そうだ。不幸にも高野君は風向きが変わるまで存命することができなかった。だが幸い美代ちゃんという後継者に研究を託せた。だから私はこの命ある限り美代ちゃんの研究を最大限応援する。私は高野君に協力を約束したのに、さまざまなしがらみから力になれず彼を失望させた。その償いを命ある限りしていこうと思っている。それが高野君が無二の親友と呼んでくれた私のこの世に残された最後の仕事だと思っとる。
先生、本当にありがとうございます。
いや、いい。私も死ぬ前に洗いざらいを話せてすっきりした。とにかく私の目が黒いうちは美代ちゃんの研究に一切の不自由はさせん。何かあったらいつでも頼りなさい。助力は惜しまないからの。
Takano couldn't even imagine what kind of bond this old man and her grandfather had between them. But thanks to that bond, Takano was able to gain a powerful supporter. Tears welled up in Takano's eyes as she gave him an emotional look, but in her mind she was practically dancing at the promise of the old man's full support. The old man and Takano both bowed at the same time to show each other their appreciation. Once that was done, the old man became a little more serious. After that far too lengthy preamble, he finally said what he really wanted to tell her.
そういうことだ。私が言いたいのはつまり、ひなみ沢症候群には歴史すらも作りかねない魔力が宿っているということだ。それは日本社会すらもねじ曲げかねない。そこのところをよく肝に銘じて慎重に研究をしなさい。